Hi everyone, I'm Aidan Michaels, and this morning I'm joined by the man who's been on the mic for the Philadelphia Flyers for 30 plus years now, as well as occasionally one of the voices of the NHL on TNT. It's Jim Jackson. Jim, thrilled that you're doing this. How are you enjoying the week off?
Doing great. Yeah, I went to Florida last week, got some R&R, and then now getting ready for the season to ramp back up. And of course, enjoying the Four Nations face-off. It's been great.
Absolutely. I was going to say, big game between the U.S. and Canada tonight. I assume you're going for the U.S. I don't know. Are you just a big hockey fan?
Yeah, I'm kind of a big hockey fan. Plus, there's two Flyers on Team Canada, so whether they both play, I don't know. But Sanheim and Konechny are there. I certainly want to root for the U.S., but I can't root against TK and Sandy. So it's one of those things where I'll be kind of rooting for maybe a U.S. win, but a Konechny goal and a Sanheim assist or something like that.
Dude, that's how I feel as a Kings fan. I'm like, I'm hoping Doughty scores some goals, but I
Uh,
need the U.S. to win. I have to be a Kachuk fan, which is really weird for me, but for the U.S., I guess we'll see.
yeah, I'm a huge Austin Matthews fan, so I do think he's, believe it or not, underrated because his overall game, which I think we saw in the game on Saturday. He didn't contribute offensively at all, but he was so good defensively. That's something that another superstar does not have in his game that isn't talked about. I mean, Connor McDavid, easily the most exciting player. I shouldn't say easily because McKinnon's kind of in his realm too, but that doesn't mean he's the best. Everyone just anoints Connor as the best player in the world. He's the most exciting player in the world. If you go by all around, McKinnon might have him. Matthews may have him. There are others. Leon Draisaitl. There's a lot of really good players. Connor's fantastic for the league because he's a highlight reel in the making every night. But highlights are great. They don't always win the games. So I'm happy to see Austin Matthews getting some love for that. But having said that, it really comes down to this game tonight. If Austin Matthews is quiet and not as effective defensively, and McDavid explodes, as I think he might. This might be his moment. Everyone's talking about Crosby, and he's had a great tournament and all that. And McKinnon had 2 goals the other night, but it's like this could be the night for McDavid to just take over because even though the Oilers went to Game 7 last year and he won the Conn Smythe, there were times where he was shut down in the finals. So he has to, I think, rise to the occasion here and just, if he's what everybody says he is, he's got to take control tonight. We'll see if he does.
Yeah, we'll see. It's going to be very exciting. I mean, watching that first Canada-U.S. game was unbelievable. I mean, the fights, obviously, to start things off was incredible. So we will see. I'm very nervous. I don't even want to think about it right now, but we'll get there when we get there. So I want to talk about just your career start, going all the way back. Uh, One, how did you get into broadcasting, and was there a moment when you were like, okay, yeah, I'm good enough to do this professionally?
That the last part of that question, I'm not sure I even have that yet. I've been doing it for 30 years. You're always, I think the great athletes always say you're always worried about the next person coming or whether you're going to be able to keep your position or what have you. I think as a broadcaster, you have a little of that too. But I grew up in upstate New York, small town near Utica, and I loved sports. I wanted to play sports. I played some of the youth sports, but quickly realized I wasn't going to make it to the big time with my athletic abilities. So I had to find another way. My father actually was the first one to suggest, "Hey, you're always talking about sports. You're always watching the games and kind of talking during the games. How about broadcasting?" And obviously, growing up close to Syracuse, Newhouse became my goal to get in there, get my grades up. I did. I went to Syracuse, got done with school, and then it was like I had nothing. So it was basically there where I walked into a radio station and asked them if I could just hang around for like a couple weeks, and they said yes. And one thing led to another. I ended up getting a job there, and then the sports director left. The Devils came to town with the AHL team. I ended up doing AHL hockey at a very young age, and then did 6 years of the Utica Devils in the AHL, and then got the job here in Philadelphia. 2 years on radio, and now the last 30 on TV, and I mean, that's a very snapshot kind of look at how I got here because there's lots of ups and downs along the way, but I'm one of the lucky ones. A lot of people in this business have to travel all over the country to get to where I basically grew up in Utica, went to school 45 minutes away, went back to Utica, worked for about 6, 7 years, and then came to Philadelphia. So very lucky, very blessed.
Now, I read a story about you when you were doing a Devils game, had a little scuffle with a fan in the middle
Haha,
of
yes.
the. Is there any truth to that? What is that?
There's true. There wasn't the Devils though. This was my
Oh,
one
okay.
year before the Devils got there. I was doing ACHL hockey, which is now the ECHL. It was the Atlantic Coast Hockey League, which, by the way, there were 5 teams to start the season. One team folded, 4 teams in the end, so everybody made the playoffs. And then in the finals, it was the Mohawk Valley Comets, the team I was broadcasting for, and the Virginia Lancers, coached by none other than John Tortorella
Oh,
in his
wow.
first year as a professional coach. And Torts' team would win in 7 games. But all year long, when I had gone on the road to Vinton, Virginia, where the Lancers played, the Lancer Lot Arena, I had done the games up in the press box. I get there for game 7, and there's a radio setup already there, and a local radio station had jumped on the bandwagon. They were going to call game 7. So I said, "Well, where am I going to do the game?" We got a spot for you. So they showed me this cement landing down probably about the top of the first section. This was about a 5,000 seat arena, maybe. So really close to the ice. But I was looking at the goalie. I mean, it wasn't a great spot or anything, but hey, I had to call a game. So, but the problem with it was in the way of fans. I was where I would have to sit. They put a table there and everything. I'm directly in the line of sight of some fans in that section. And I'm thinking, this may not go well. And it didn't. Because as the some of the fans arrived already having some liquid refreshment, then they got some more liquid refreshment. They get a little brazen, and they were yelling at me at first, saying, "Hey, get down in front." And I mean, there's no way if I was sitting down, there was nowhere for me to go. And then in the middle of the first period, all of a sudden, I felt the microphone, the headphone cord jump back, and then I was literally pulled back by a fan, and he's trying to push me out of the way, and I'm on the air, I'm cutting my mic, and so it got dicey there. But we had a guy, one of our players was suspended for something he did earlier in the series, who was down by our room, and he saw this, and he came up and basically was my bodyguard for the rest of the game. But yeah, a lot of stories from one year in the ACHL, maybe more there than I've had in my career since. But that was one of them where I was practically mugged on the air. Uh, did get the job done, but Virginia won the game, and John Tortorella had his first title.
Wow. There you go. Speaking of John Tortorella, I mean, did you get a chance to meet him when you were doing the games back there?
You know what? In retrospect, I'm not 100% sure. He didn't remember me. I remembered him only because obviously his coaching career took off. But I don't think I talked to him. I mean, as a local announcer in the minors, you'd get very little exposure to the other team's coaches, even in a league of, at that point, 4 teams. I remember seeing him. He was very emotional on the bench, as he still is. And I remember him. He's a very memorable character, but I don't remember us having a lot of conversations. I do remember going up to him when I think he was coaching in Tampa, and and I had gotten to the league and say, "Hey, we actually were in the Lancer Lotteria together a couple of times," and he said, "What? What? Tell me about it." He knew right away, and he named the head coach of the Comets right away. How's he doing? I go, I've lost touch and all this, but. So it's interesting because here we are all these years later, and I'm broadcasting a team that he's coaching.
Yeah. So as a play-by-play announcer, how often do you meet with John Tortorella before games and what's that process like?
Yeah, I mean, for the first year he coached here, we did what is standard operating procedure in the NHL. We met with him before every game, and he is tremendous in that setting. He talks a lot. He's very, very passionate about the game, and I got tremendous material from that. At times, maybe too much material. He would have to trust us to know what was good to go on the air and what wasn't. But then the new regime came in with Keith Jones, ironically, a guy who I had worked with for 17 years, and Daddy Briere and everybody. The rules changed and those went away. So I don't have that much, to be honest with you, much contact with him now. I go to all his, or the ones that I'm around for, the press conferences. I can probably grab him by the bus or in the hotel just to chit chat, but there's not much contact with him at all, and I'm sad about that. I've made that known to everybody that it's a tool we've lost because he does give you a lot of great information, but he also gives you a lot of great information in the press conferences. So we just try to make with what we have and go with it.
Yeah, and obviously he's an amazing coach, one of my favorites. But there are also some viral videos going around of him during press conferences going after some reporters when they don't answer
Yeah.
the best question. Have you been in one of the press conferences where he kind of not goes off on a reporter, but gives him a hard time?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. In a general sense, here in Philadelphia, he hasn't had like a personal tete-a-tete like he had with Larry Brooks in New York, for instance, or maybe some others along the way. But he's had his moments. There have been some young reporters that he got upset with early on. I think that was in his first year. Um, so yeah, I mean, I've John Tortorella is a fascinating individual. One of the nicest human beings you'll meet in the sport of hockey. I mean, he has a huge heart. Obviously, you probably know about his love of dogs and how involved he is with that. But he has horses as well. But he has a big heart. He loves to talk hockey, and a smile on his face often when he's not talking in a press conference setting. But then you see the public sees him mostly behind the bench and on the podium, and that's a different John Tortorella. He's a very emotional guy. Those press conferences where he goes viral are often right after a loss or after a game. He has not digested the game yet. It's still in him, and so he takes it out, I think, a little bit on other people because he's got to get that out. He's an emotional guy, and behind the bench, obviously, he's very emotional too. So that's what the public sees. What they don't see as much is just a really nice human being. So it's he's an interesting character because the contrast is very stark.
Right. I'm curious about because I know some of the coaches' perspectives, but an announcer's perspective on somebody like Mich, who unbelievable young player, by the way, doing things like the lacrosse goal, trying that. What do you think about that?
He's tried it a lot. It's not like he just tried it once or twice. He came very close the last time too, but I mean, John Tortorella has made no bones about the fact he doesn't like the play. When Trevor Zegras did it, he criticized him and all this and that. But he has also said this year that I've lost that one. That too many players are trying it now, and that it is part of the NHL. I think that you have to watch it with the lacrosse goals. There's often a better play out in front. So if there is a better play out in front, the lacrosse goal becomes a kind of a selfish play. If it's the only play you got and you think you have the goalie leaning, it's a good play. But I think Matt is going to eventually score on one of these because he just keeps trying. He's very, very determined to get one of those, and he certainly has the skill to do it. So he'll probably get it done. And I think probably John Tortorella will be gritting his teeth on the bench as he does.
When was the last time you saw a flyer that young that was showing this much promise?
There have been a lot of great young players, Aidan, through the years with the Fly. I mean, I was here for Eric Lindros. His second year was my first. Nothing more dominant than that. Eric Lindros in his first 3, 4 years in the league. He was just a wrecking ball with ridiculous speed and skill. I think could have been if it wasn't for injuries and whatever happened as far as his breakdown relationships with the Flyers and just all the other stuff. I mean, I think he could have been the best player ever. He just had so much skill. As it turned out, he's a Hall of Famer. It's not like he was a bad player. He's still a very good player and a Hall of Famer. So, but his first 3 or 4 years, he was just to watch him was amazing, especially if you like physical hockey, because he had that aspect of his game as well. Claude Giroux, Mike Richards, when he first came up, was great. Jeff Carter. I can go right down the list. And then the veteran players like Peter Forsberg's first 20 games as a Flyer. He and Gagne and Knubel got together in a line, and they were just ridiculously good. As dominant as a line, even more dominant than the Legion of Doom offensively, not physically, but offensively in those first 20 games. Then he had the ankle issue pop up, and that was a shame. We didn't get to see a lot of the best of Forsberg after that. Still a good player, but no longer great because of the injury. As far as young players, veteran players, there's been a lot through the years. Michkov has tremendous talent, but he's learning. I mean, he has got a lot on his plate. Doesn't speak the language pretty much at all coming over. He does now a little bit, and he's getting there on that. Different style of play, different grind that he's had to deal with. So he's had some great moments. He had a 5 game stretch where he had multiple point games pretty much through the whole stretch, or at least he averaged 2 points a game for a stretch of 5 games where it looked like, wow, this kid's already conquered the league. And then he had about a 10 game stretch where you didn't see him. You didn't notice him. He wasn't contributing. So I think that's kind of what happens when you're a 19, now 20-year-old player in this league. It's a tough, tough league for these young players. I'm not seeing Connor Bedard lead the Blackhawks into contention very quickly. Celebrini looks like a great player, but he's not taking the Sharks to the playoffs this year. It's a tough league, and Michkov has a decent supporting cast around him. I think they're still looking to find him a center that he meshes well with. That would help too. And he's looking to try to find his niche on the power play. The Flyers' power play has been a problem the last 3 years. They were hoping he'd be a big part of the solution, and early on it looked like he would be. It struggled again this year, and I think he's trying to find his niche there too. So, but the skill level is obvious. His vision is something that I maybe the best I've ever seen from a Flyer. I mean, Claude Giroux had great vision too, but I mean his ability to see plays before they happen is tremendous. He's got great hands, obviously. Not the fastest player in the world, but makes up for that with his IQ because the puck seems to follow him when he's on his game.
So and not that this matters for me, I'm sure you've heard this a lot, but I always thought that you've done an amazing job at staying neutral on broadcasts. So, whenever the Flyers beat the Kings and I watch your broadcast of the Flyers beating the Kings, I always thought it was great. I love, a neutral broadcast. And I know there's more leeway when you're calling games for NBC Philly. But was there ever a time, maybe earlier in your career or in college, where you had to essentially fake excitement when a team
Hmm,
like scored?
that's a great question. I really love this game. Um, Up until 2020, I can tell you I never had to fake excitement. But when we were doing those games in the studio off TV monitors, I had to fake it a little bit. When you're not in the arena and there's no crowd, it's a little where you pump yourself up a little bit. But I can honestly say outside of those games, when I'm in the arena, when there's fans in the seats, and this game's happening, I don't have to fake anything. It's pretty much all genuine, and I appreciate you saying I'm neutral. Many people think I'm a homer. I would say I'm a homer to some degree, but I try to keep it professional. I don't want to ever be saying we and us and that kind of stuff. I do want to credit the opposition when they make a great play, and so you do your best with that. I mean, there may be times when people here don't think I'm a homer enough. So, it's a hard balance to walk sometimes. I do know when I do games for TNT, it's completely different. I'm not usually doing a Flyers game, obviously on TNT, and so I'm right in the middle, and it's kind of refreshing not to have to worry about being a homer. So because there's no way I can be a homer, and I remember the James Van Riemsdyk scored a goal for Toronto last year. I was doing a game between Toronto and Boston, and I when I listened back, I did get a little more excited than maybe I would on a normal goal because obviously I know JVR really well from his 2 stints in Philadelphia, and I just think the world of him. He's such a great guy, but I listened back and I did say to myself, that might have been a little more than like when whoever might have scored for Toronto in that game. And but the thing is, when I'm on TNT and it's Toronto Boston, it's mostly Boston fans watching, so I was probably safe.
Yeah, fair enough. And that's always going to be a thing. Everyone's going to think that, either you're being a homer, oh, he hates my team, he loves this
Oh,
team.
Aiden, now I'll tell you a story, a quick
Um,
story. There's no winning that battle.
yeah.
So this goes a ways back, but it still is a story that holds true today. John Davidson, you may not remember him as a color analyst because it's been a while now since he did it, but he was, along with Bill Clement, the best in the business at being an analyst for several years, for 2 decades, really. And so he was doing a game for Fox. Now, he also did the Rangers games, but he was doing the game nationally for Fox, and it was a playoff game between the Flyers and Rangers in 1997. And Flyers were on their way to the finals, in fact. Very contentious series. The game takes place. Fox is doing it. We aren't, so I'm not doing the game. But I am doing a post game radio show with Steve Coates. So the game ends. The Flyers ended up I can't even remember who won the game, to be honest with you, but it was a contentious game, and there was fights and all this and that, and so the fans are calling in and they're just all over JD. How do they put the Ranger announcer on a Flyer playoff game? That's just ridiculous. And I try to explain it. Well, he is their analyst. He's going to do the game no matter who the team is. And I said, I know John Davidson. He's a true pro. I doubt very much whether he was a homer or anything like that. And later that night, I get a call from JD, and he said, "Hey, I was listening on the way. I was driving out. And I was listening on WIP. I just wanted to thank you for having my back. They were coming at me pretty hard." I said, "Well, JD, I didn't even hear the broadcast, but I know you enough to know that you were professional with your call. If you give an opinion on a call and it goes against the Flyers, immediately you're a homer. So." He thanked me for that. He said, "Funny thing is, as I was driving, I got up to Trenton and I started to lose IP. So I turned the fan on in New York, and I was getting killed in New York for overcompensating and being pro Flyers." And that is our business. I
Yeah.
mean, Joe Buck has forever been called anti Philadelphia. He's not anti Philadelphia. I'm not from Philly, so I'm not as passionate about the Phillies and the Eagles, the two teams that he was calling nationally at the time. And I would watch his broadcast and say, there's no bias there. What happens is, as I said earlier, I am a homer to some degree when I call Flyers games. So Flyers fans get used to that. They get used to Bush and I, or Jonesy and I for many years, Dorney and I before that, Coatsy and I. They get used to us. We're talking a lot more about the Flyers. We certainly get a little more excited about Flyers goals, Flyers fights, things like that. That's just comes with the territory of covering a team on a day in, day out basis. They're used to that. So when they get someone doing a game nationally, that person, in all likelihood, is right down the middle. That's going to feel like it's pro the other team to them because they're used to us. That's how I explain it. But you can't win that battle. Believe me, I've done national games enough to know I get killed from both sides. I get praise from both sides. It's like, which is true, And even I had a one time where I was told by someone in management, this is a long time ago, that I was being an apologist for the officials, and my partner at the time was really going after officials a lot. So I could see why they would think that, because I was trying to give the other side occasionally just to balance it a little bit. And so I got that. The guy pulled me over during the pregame skate and said, "Hey, you're an apologist for the officials. Don't ever do that. Let your partner just go to town on the officials. Call the game." I said, "Okay." So we played Calgary that night, took the red eye home. I get in my car. It's like 6 a.m., 7 a.m. I turn on IP, and there's a talk show host, and he says, "I love Jim Jackson's call, but man, the whine fest about officiating is just ridiculous." And I'm like, wow, I'm an apologist and a whiner about the officiating all at the same time. So it really is what people want to hear. And you just cannot use any of what you hear there. There are certain people you have to trust if they come to you and say, you got to do this better or whatever. But, stuff certainly on social media and all this other, you just can't. You can't let that bother you. And as you're a young broadcaster, you have to have thick skin. You just have to. I mean, I have a broadcast coaching program, and one of the things I really stress is, you have to be able to persevere in this business. Part of that perseverance is being thick-skinned. So certainly you have to do that in this business, no doubt about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was gonna say, hearing that from people on Twitter is, at that point, it's better to just tune that out. Who cares?
Well, here's a fresh example. I just put out a tweet post now, I guess, last night on the passing of Mike Lang, who obviously a Hall of Fame announcer, icon in Pittsburgh, really throughout the league. And I said something to that effect. He's an icon not only in Pittsburgh, but throughout the National Hockey League. But for those of us who know him, we remember him for his grace and kindness just as much. He'll be nailing the calls on hockey nights in heaven, because he used to say hockey night in Pittsburgh. That was my social message. I got some Yahoo sending something to me saying, "Where's your passion? Are you always this robotic?" I'm like, well, I didn't put a lot of emojis in my post. Maybe I needed to put some hearts or something, but there was plenty of emotion in that. I don't know how that one would be construed as robotic. So yeah, you just get all this stuff. You can't. Again, I take it now and I kind of chuckle. For early on when I was younger, certainly, and obviously, thankfully for me, when I was younger, there wasn't social media, but you'd have other forms of feedback. But then once social media became the norm, and I was still a middle-aged broadcaster then. The first wave of social media, you're getting all these things coming at you. You're like, whoa, ooh, this is not good. And yeah, I now just chuckle. In fact, I accepted an award 4 or 5 years ago here in Philadelphia, and I went up and I went back and I found like 6 or 7 mean tweets. They used to call them. Obviously, you've seen them on the. Is it Saturday Night Live who does the mean tweets? I don't know. Somebody does it,
Oh yeah,
and
Jimmy Kimmel.
uh, yeah, yeah. So I brought like 6 of them, and I said, people often say when they win awards like this, it's a humbling experience. I don't see that it really is humbling because I'm being told I've done a good job, and I like that. Here's what's humbling, and I read 6 where they just killed me. One of them said his voice is like fingernails on a blackboard. He's always squealing, or all his criticisms. So pro Flyers, it's ridiculous. Looks at things only through orange and black colored glasses. All these criticisms, and I read them to all of the audience, and they said, "Now I'm humbled," and they got a kick out of that. So yeah, you're gonna get the negative feedback on social media, and if you don't laugh at it, it's gonna eat you up. So you better laugh at it.
Makes sense. My last question here. Of course, I'm a student broadcaster. Many of my friends are as well. What is something, I know there's a lot of things, I'm sure, but something that's important for us young broadcasters to know that we might not think of?
Well, I have my 3 fundamentals, but you have to take my broadcast coaching course,
This is a
Aiden,
good, this is a
to
good ad
get
for it. This is a good ad.
that. No, I'll give them to you. I'm not going to get into the details behind them, but I call it my pep speech, and it's not a pep talk, but it's PEP: preparation, experience, perseverance. We already talked about the perseverance. Experience, you absolutely have to get as much as you can in all realms. You might want to be a play-by-play guy, but by doing this podcast, you're getting yourself better by getting reps in front of the camera with a microphone in front of you as well. So it's all about reps. It's all about broadening your horizons, spreading your wings, experience. There's no such thing as bad experience. I can tell you there are bad experiences, but if you learn something from something, it's good experience. And then back to the first one, preparation. I mean, I show in my program my preparation for a broadcast, and many of the students are kind of looking at me like, wow, that's a lot. And I don't show it to them to try to impress them or tell them they have to do that. I just feel that with preparation, it's a case by case basis. You, Aiden, you may need less preparation than I do to get into what you call your broadcaster zone. But whatever level of preparation gets you to the point where you feel like as you sit down and you look down at the ice or the field or the court or whatever you're broadcasting, and that game is about to start, you feel like send it my way. I'm ready for anything. Now, are you? No, because live sports, we're never ready for anything. Al Michaels got ready to do a World Series game in 1989 at Candlestick Park. He ended up calling an earthquake. So you can never be completely prepared, but you can feel like you're prepared, feel like within reason you're prepared for anything to happen in that game. And if you're at that point, I say you're in your broadcaster zone, similar to what an athlete's in his zone when, the net looks huge or the basket looks huge or the baseball looks for a hitter like a beach ball. You hear about the zones players get into. Well, broadcasters can get into those too, but I think they get into them by being completely and thoroughly prepared for the broadcast. So preparation, experience, and perseverance. But I've got lots more on that if you want to take my course, Aiden. So
There you go.
there's a pitch. There's a pitch to you.
There you go. Well, thank you very much, Jim. It's been an absolute joy to speak with you this morning. Appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure, Aiden. And you do a great job. You're very composed, well spoken. So keep up. What year are you again? I'm
I'm a
sorry. I
junior.
should junior. Yeah. So you're just getting there. Enjoy your college years. I tell all my students that are in college this. I have several that are seniors this year. It's like, don't forget to smell the roses. Enjoy your senior year because once college is gone, it's gone. So I say that to you as a junior too. So enjoy what's left of your college education. I'd love to work with you too.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Thank you for watching. I'm Aidan Michaels. This was Jim Jackson.